So, Exodus 29 verse 9, the priesthood is theirs, that is Aaron and his children, by a lasting ordinance. And we are saying that's not a New Testament. That's not a New Testament carryover. And so we have seen, I think there was a church in America which was on TV where somebody led the church for over 40 years, but he felt like his children are the only ones who can inherit. Tries a daughter, it doesn't work. Tries a son, doesn't work. And obviously the son, the whole structure came down. They ended up in such serious debt, even when he's still alive, that by the time he died, they had to seek the new permission of the new owners where to do the funeral. How embarrassing. I found it very embarrassing. And there's a likelihood that the whole thing came tumbling down because of pre-treating New Testament work like Aaronic priesthood, where you feel your children, even if they're not gifted, that's not their area. You have many other people gifted in the congregation, in your team, but you insist on giving unqualified people who destroy God's work because of thinking you have the lasting ordinance. I think we need to be careful, those of us whom the Lord has helped to begin new work in God's kingdom. We need to be warned that if this is God's work, not our work, then allow God to use whoever He uses. As you grow older, allow other people whom God has placed with a gift to take over, rather than insist on your own children taking over. Exodus chapter 30, verse 14 and 15 is actually saying, all who cross over, that is in a census, those 20 years old or more, are to give an offering to the Lord. The rich are not to give more than a half shekel, and the poor are not to give less when you make the offering to the Lord to atone for your lives. It's a day of atonement. It's a census. Now, but we are learning several things. First of all, giving is an adult affair because you must give out of your own sweat. You are not expected to steal in order to give. You are not expected to give out of a loan. Don't go collect a bank loan to build a shop and then steal from the money supposed to be for constructing the shop in order to give to God. You are supposed to give out of your own property, out of a loan, which you promise to use in a very specific way. So that really is for adults. But it's clear that there's a place for giving. Giving does not buy you salvation. Salvation is totally free. So we do not give in order to get forgiveness. We give in thankfulness because we are forgiven. We don't give in order to get. We give because we already have gotten. And I think that's an important concept, because you are not supposed to give out of what you don't have. So what you are giving is a gift from God. We don't actually give God anything new. We just return a little of what He has given us in thankfulness. This issue of Aaronic priesthood compared with our priesthood has many, many aspects. First of all, in Exodus 30, verse 14 and 15, we are told the people who would be counted as worshippers, not children, is anybody who was 20 years old or more. And they were to worship also in giving an offering to the Lord. It means that we need to understand children have a way of worship, and we must train them to worship properly. But by the age of 20, you are supposed to be able to work on your own so that you can okay give your own. You must teach your children to give out of their own savings, out of their own property, out of their own sweat. And by the age of 20, it sounds like in Israel, it was assumed you could actually be producing something on your own. And obviously, I know that to be true in the sense that by that time the girls are married, so the boys may also be married. And you can't be married and you are not feeding your family. So I think it's something good to note that one requirement for worship is giving, and that it is not required of children. It required of those who are adults. They should sweat, get something out of their sweat, and then a part of that give back to God. So all who cross over during our census, those 20 years old or more, are to give an offering to the Lord. But in my understanding, the offering has to depend on what God has given you. I think it needs to be understood in the New Testament. Paul encouraged the churches he had established on the first day of the week to set apart an offering. But it had to depend on how God has gifted you and what he had made you willing to give. And that needs to be part of worship in the New Testament, where we not only worship in singing, in living righteous lives, we also take a little of what God has given us and set it apart for ministry, for use in God's service. We already ourselves are in God's service, but we support others in God's service. I think that will be important, that we understand that we must set apart part of the money. Why do we do that? 3 benefits. Number 1, it's not very easy to give. And to give people who are not necessarily your friends is just ministry. So by giving, and it's painful to give, it will cause you to ask, why am I giving? And when you realize you are giving back to God, it will turn your mind to God in thankfulness for his many gifts. Why are you giving? Number 2, because you want to be involved in extending God's kingdom. There is what you yourself can do, but there are many other things that others can do if you facilitate them. So you get to rejoice, but the money you are giving is benefiting others. And that is why you're giving, because you want God to continue to give you, so you show your dependence upon him. But the thing I note in this verse is that when it is giving required of the whole congregation, we must aim at setting such a low figure that even the poorest of the poor has ability to give it. Never set a requirement which the poor will struggle to give and yet claim it is giving to God. Giving must either be set at a very low level, or alternatively, it must be left to people to decide how much to give. Do you notice what is in Exodus 30? The rich are not to give more than a half shekel. Half a shekel was said to be very small. So the rich will say, surely this is too little. How can I give God such a small thing? No, because this is a requirement during a certain type of worship. They are told that is enough. We are not here to show off. Don't give any more than half a shekel. The poor are not to give any less, because it's been set so low, even the poor can afford. Is that what you do in our churches? Or we keep setting figures and saying women 1,000 shillings. Yet there are people in that church who cannot afford 1,000 shillings. And the rich show off in Harambes. They are giving to God, but they are getting their chance to show how rich they are. That's not the picture I see in this place. The rich and the poor in worship are not necessarily to give any more or less. In this type of worship thing, we either give according to our ability or we give the very minimum. Set a minimum so low, even the poor can afford. I think there are several implications of this. Maybe you are teaching a Sunday school class and you want to go for a trip. If you choose a trip to an expensive place, it means some children will not come. And yet it is part of the lesson, the things you are teaching them. Are you really following this example? Where if something is required of everybody, it must be at the cheapest. So you as a Sunday school teacher must look for a place where that lesson can be learned. But it's going to be so, you are going to require so little money, even the poorest child can afford it. Alternatively, if you pick a place that is expensive, then you must either ask for donations so that you yourself will meet the costs for the poor children. And those who can afford will be allowed to pay. Those who can't afford will still come. But you cannot start dividing up your Sunday school class by riches. Oh, those ones can't afford, so they cannot come for the trip. Here, since this is the requirement in Exodus chapter 30 was for everyone, God said the poor and the rich will only give half a shekel, what anybody can afford. And we need to ask ourselves whether there are things in the church we are doing that is creating a class society where certain people cannot afford and we do not go out of our way to pay for them. So, I think church activities, people should give according to ability, but use according to need. So if, for example, you're organizing a party, let everybody give what they can, put it together, and when it comes to this celebration, people, the food will be kept there, whatever they call potluck. Then, even if you came with absolutely nothing, you will be welcome to use it. If it's truly a time of worship, a time of celebration, a time of bringing people together, getting to know each other, nobody should fail to come because they cannot afford. So the church needs to rethink its modus operandi. How do you operate? Do you make some people feel out of place because they are poor? Or do you welcome everyone? Do you allow the rich to give privately without anybody noticing so that nobody will know if they are rich? Or do you like them to give openly? Do you acknowledge certain gifts and not others? The pastor goes to the front to say, I'm so happy Brother Nganga gave me a car. What about that lady that just brought you bananas? There's a size of gift to make you acknowledge. Maybe that's why you need to be very careful about acknowledging gifts to the public. Acknowledge the person who gave you, that you should, and thank him. But why are you telling the whole congregation that so and so gave you? Except to be either you are begging for others to give you more, or you want to create a class in your church. So, all who cross over in the census, 20 years old or more, are to give an offering to the Lord. The rich are not to give more than half a shekel, and the poor are not to give less when you make the offering to the Lord to atone for their lives. And God therefore makes worship not use riches to differentiate. That in worship we must come to God without money being a hindrance. That you must create a type of worship, if you are a pastor, that allows the poor and the rich to participate. If you are doing drama, do the children of the rich who are dressed better get all the major parts, and the children of the poor, because they will be embarrassing because of their dressing, not get parts? If so, why can't the church buy a dress or a costume so that the poor child can also participate? In the committees, that the pastor select the rich people to be the ones in charge of committees and the poor not to be in charge, even when there is a poor person who is very gifted, but because he is poor, he is not given opportunities in the church to carry out the gift God has given him for the benefit of the church. We need to come to where the poor give only half a shekel, the rich give only half a shekel. In this one, everybody can participate. In God's work in the church, riches do not determine what ministry you have. You may be a messenger at work, but here you are a prophet, and your gift of prophecy will be operational. The 10 Commandments are referred to by Jesus. In fact, he summarizes them in 2. The first one is loving the Lord with all your heart, and that takes the first 4 commandments. Second one is loving others as yourself, which takes away the other 6 commandments. Again, as we compare the Aaronic priesthood and the priesthood of all believers in the New Testament, we have to ask ourselves, what about commandments? You go to certain Pentecostal churches and ask somebody to recite the 10 Commandments, but they don't even know them. Somehow we emphasize because we live in the days of grace, we don't need to know them. That can't be true. Not when Jesus refers to them in the New Testament. There must have been something special that made them be referred to throughout the Old and the New Testament. And I think it's because they summarize what the rest of the Bible is saying, that in those 10 commandments, all we learn from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelation is summarized. And that's why I would say that as part of discipleship, anybody who gets to know the Lord, as you help them to grow in the Lord, you must go through the 10 commandments with them. Help them to see how their lives is to be run like the requirements of the 10 commandments, and so bring glory to God. In Exodus chapter 31 verse 18 we read, when the Lord finished speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant law, the tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. You know, if you go through the book of Leviticus, you will see that what God told Moses is a lot. It's many chapters of the many things, how he is to build the temple, or the tabernacle, what the role of priest. It is a lot. But he gave 2 tablets. that had been written by the finger of God. And they did not contain anything else, only the Ten Commandments. That's why I think they are important even for a New Testament believer. If God saw them as important enough, all the other things Paul was to remember and go and teach the people. And also write them for us today to read. But this particular one were inscribed in the Ten Commandments, which are the ones that were kept in the Ark of Covenant. There was nothing inside the Ark of the Covenant except the Ten Commandments. That's what they put inside. And it was regarded as a holy place where they were kept. Shouldn't that suggest to you that you need, number one, to know them, number two, to understand them, number three, to obey them as a way of honoring God? We keep asking, how do I know God's will? He has stated it in the scriptures and he has summarized it in the